don't have to sit here and tell you to start Kenneth Walker if you got him on waivers, right? That's not the point of a start-sit video at this point in the fantasy season. It's week 6. You've been paying attention all year. I'm not going to give you obvious answers at this point, but at the same time, some of these decisions get tougher and tougher, especially as we get into the bye weeks. This is the first week of the 2022 NFL season that we're dealing with it, and that's why start-sit decisions become more important than ever. Not only do you have the bye weeks, you have the injuries as well, and that's why we're here at the Stochastic Fantasy Football channel to break it down. What's up, everyone? My name is Matt Savoca at Draftaholic, and I'm here giving you my toughest start-sit decisions for week 6. We go position by position after breaking down some of the key injuries to help you get ready to dominate in fantasy leagues. And speaking of dominating, you got to dominate by getting over to Underdog Fantasy. Click the link in the video description below to get up to $100 first match deposit bonus. Let's get into the action for week 6 start-sit. As we dig into week 6, let's take a look at the injuries we're monitoring as we head into the weekend. James Conner, of course, of the Arizona Cardinals, was injured, came back and played, looked pretty good, got injured again. Then his backup, Darrell Williams, also got injured, and we're still thinking that Eno Benjamin might be the one that gets a majority of the touches here. Conner has a chance to play, but honestly, I am worried about him with these multiple injuries starting to pile up. Then Keenan Allen, we're hoping we get him back on the field. My fellow analyst Nick Lepre at Notorious Fantasy has been saying for weeks that he's going to play. We've been wrong every single time. They are taking it slow with that soft tissue injury. T. Higgins used very sparingly with an ankle injury against Baltimore. Hopefully he gets his usage ramped up. And then some less likely players here. Damian Harris almost definitely not playing this week, is considered week to week, and that'll lead into my first start-sit decision. And Miami might be without their top 2 quarterbacks. Tagovailoa already ruled out. Bridgewater unlikely to play in week 6. That means it's Skylar Thompson time in Miami. Not necessarily a good thing, but with all those injuries in mind, let's get into the position by position breakdown. We'll start with the running back position, maybe the toughest we've seen this year. First running back to break down, Rhamondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. Guys, it's Stevenson time. It's Stevenson season. Harris, as we said earlier, is week to week. Almost no chance of playing week 6, and we have pretty solid evidence that Stevenson is just #good at football. Number 1 in evaded tackles per touch, number 8 in runs of 10+ yards, and he's even splitting time with Harris this season. He was a running back 2 in expected fantasy points per game. He easily shoots up to top 10 in opportunity value this week. And then look at the matchup. Cleveland is bottom 10 defensively against the rush, and rushing is exactly what the Patriots like to do. Whether it's Jones back there or Bailey Zappi, Stevenson will get his touches and is a must start on the road. Despite it being a low total game in Cleveland, I have to start him. We have him top 5 in our running back rankings this week. And then we're going to shoot way down the board at the running back position, because many of those top 10 running backs, of course, you're starting them every week. We are struggling for flex players here, and so this week, just plug your nose and play Cam Akers. If he's terrible one more time, you have permission for me to drop him. I mean, the stats are awful, right? 56th in yards per touch, 43rd in evaded tackles per touch, 45th among running backs in expected fantasy points per game, 62nd in fantasy points per game, but we play home favorite running backs, especially ones favored by 10.5 points when they have an opportunity share on their own team above 50%. And right now, Cam Akers is sitting at a 53% opportunity share. I'm scared too, okay? This doesn't look awesome when you look at his stats, but Carolina defensively just fired their defensive coordinator and their head coach. They've been slipping in basically every defensive metric since starting kind of strong. Right now, they're 18th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing offenses. And Los Angeles, remember, Stafford is really struggling with his efficiency, maybe due to that injury. They may switch to a more conservative, rush-heavy approach and get back to their winning ways that way in a must-win game against a PJ Walker-led Carolina Panthers. The Rams cannot afford to lose this game, and I think they keep it steady on the ground with Akers. Take a shower after you put him in your starting lineup. I think he's okay this week. And I'm sad to say that I'm sitting Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you could argue that Pollard has been the most dynamic player in the Dallas Cowboys offense, but he's still just running back 36 in fantasy points per game. And the Philadelphia defense is not one to mess around with if you don't have to when you're starting flex players. They're number 1 in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, top 5 in total defensive DVOA, and Pollard just doesn't get enough valuable touches or opportunity value to be relied on week to week. His 8.8 expected fantasy points per game, that's outside the top 45 running backs right now in the NFL. he's getting the efficiency. Once again, one of the highest yards per touch in the NFL, currently 4th among running backs. But he's a mediocre flex play at best this week. The matchup is bad. They are 5.5 point underdogs right now to the Eagles on the road, and Pollard is just not a player I can trust this week. Hey guys, just want to tell you about an awesome offer from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. There is truly no better time to get into the action than this week at Underdog Fantasy, because they have the Best Ball Resurrection Tournament starting Thursday this week of Week 6 in the NFL. Goes from Week 6 to Week 17, and a $10 entry can net you up to $100K. And if you click the link in the video description below or use promo code Stochastic, you can get up to a $100 first match deposit bonus. That means the first time you deposit, they will match it up to $100. It's hard to get free money in fantasy football, but this is one great way to do it. Check it out today, Underdog Fantasy. To the wide receiver position, I am happy to say that we can start Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett is averaging more fantasy points per game this season than he was last season. I'll repeat that. Tyler Lockett is averaging more fantasy points per game with Geno Smith than he was with Russell Wilson last season. Same player we always expected, 96% route participation rate, 26% target share, even with DK Metcalf on the field. Here's what we didn't expect. In target quality rating, according to playerprofiler.com, Tyler Lockett is the 4th best wide receiver, meaning the quality of his targets are very good. He's wide receiver 5 in deep targets, so you would expect efficiency to be there, and boom, Lockett is wide receiver 17 overall in yards per route run. Arizona looked a little bit better defensively, but still they're bottom 5 in defensive DVOA. Geno Smith, what can you say? 3 straight weeks of 22 plus fantasy points, 2 straight weeks of 30 plus fantasy points, showing the ability to top 300 yards as a passer. And this is a fairly easy matchup when you just look at the Arizona defense on paper. I am happy to say that Tyler Lockett is a high quality flex starter once again. And here's another veteran I'm going right back to the well on. It's Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings. I get it, guys. The fantasy points per game, they're down this year. They're down like 25% year over year, but don't be one of those players who's dropped him. I've actually heard of him getting dropped in some leagues. He's already had 2 games inside the top 24 wide receivers. Guys, wide receiver is a variance-based position. But I get it. He's wide receiver 40 in target share, wide receiver 55 in air yard share, and expected fantasy points per game, he barely cracks the top 36. But Miami is, well, they're imploding defensively. After a strong start, they're down to bottom 7 in defensive DVOA, and I think Minnesota has a chance to dominate from start to finish. That means a lot of Cook, a lot of Jefferson, and of course, a lot of Thielen. Like I said, we've seen some top 24 games, and the red zone usage continues to ramp up a little by little. I am predicting a top 20 finish for Thielen this week at the wide receiver position. I think he can go right back there after a 2-week absence in solid performance from Thielen. He's going to have a good one in Miami this week. And while we continue to see splash plays from this young player, I am keeping Drake London on the bench in week 6. He looks great for a rookie, guys, but this is kind of a riddle. Number 3 in the NFL in target share right now. Number 33 in expected fantasy points per game. The value of the opportunity within the Atlanta offense just isn't there. It's just not a strong offense in general, and the only thing they seem to be doing relatively well is running the ball. And Atlanta's playing a very, very strong San Francisco defense at home. San Francisco right now number 1 in defensive DVOA. While they're dealing with some injuries in the secondary that could theoretically leave some openings for London, I'm not really trusting it. Even with Pitts still coming back from injury, I don't want to start Drake London. I would much rather keep him on my bench, at least for this week. And as we move to the tight end position, we'll keep it right in that San Francisco versus Atlanta game. I'm happy to start George Kittle, which I haven't felt that way for most of the games this year. The fantasy stats, they just aren't pretty for a player we know is highly talented. He's not even getting 6 targets a game. That really hurts his chances. And you don't get points for blocking either. His 9.0 yards per reception would be the lowest of his career if it held throughout the season, but I think we start to see a turnaround in his production on Sunday. Atlanta has been bad in all phases defensively, and this is an offense that, while it does typically end up losing, has been relatively productive, which could lead to some shootout potential here. This is a defense that traded away a starting linebacker this week, and I expect Kittle's mid-season blow-up game, that 150-yard game that we tend to see from him, to happen very soon. Why not as 5-point favorites in Atlanta in a relatively fast-paced game? I think it's going to happen this week. Put him in your starting lineup. And on the flip side, I don't think you can trust Dalton Schultz this week. We used to trust the volume, especially with Dak Prescott at the helm, but with Noah Brown coming on, Michael Gallup running more routes, and of course, CeeDee Lamb getting his, we basically have to pray for volume, and we know there probably won't be efficiency because of the fact he keeps re-aggravating that same knee. Then look at the matchup. The Eagles are top 12 in schedule-adjusted fantasy points to opposing offenses, top 6 when you isolate just the tight end position, and the Cowboys are 5.5 underdogs on the road in Philadelphia. It's just not a situation you have to go to. Could he fall into the end zone? Absolutely, but that's really all you're relying on. He's outside the top 12 tight ends for me. I think you can keep him on your bench. And finally, if you're scrounging for a low-end QB1, I think you could do worse than Jimmy Garoppolo. If not in Atlanta, in a dome, then win Jimmy G. It's a high implied team total for the San Francisco 49ers. It should be a relatively fast-paced game against a Atlanta offense that has been somewhat competent at times, but we all know that San Francisco loves to run the ball, and that's how this unravels if you're betting on Garoppolo this week. Certainly not the Atlanta defense stopping him, who has looked outside one half against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pretty much incompetent all season. They're in sell mode. As I said earlier, they traded a starting linebacker to the Cleveland Browns this week. They're 27th in Football Outsiders DVOA defensively and 30th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing offenses. Jimmy G is a low-end QB1 this week, and you stack him up with Kittle maybe. He's pretty good I just have him inside my top 15, but just barely. And while I may be happy for the New York Giants fans out there, I still don't really want to play Daniel Jones at the quarterback position against the Baltimore Ravens as nearly touchdown underdogs at home. I mean, hats off to the team. Brian Dable's got that team playing well. They're 4-1, winning close games. They won a thriller, I should say, in London against the Packers last week, but by most advanced metrics, this Giants team and their passing attack particularly is looking mediocre to bad. Jones has been relatively accurate, QB2 in true completion percentage, but that hasn't led to efficiency in the passing game at all. He's outside the top 20 in yards per attempt and in true passer rating as well. He's really been making do as a rusher, right? Ranking 4th among quarterbacks in rushes per game and 7th in red zone carries per game. But against the Baltimore defense that is improving week over week and knows how to guard against a rushing quarterback, because I see a pretty good one in practice every day, I'm sitting Daniel Jones. I think they cap his rushing upside, and when you force Jones to pass, he is below average at best. Even with the buys this week, I think there are safer options at the quarterback position. That's going to do it, guys. We've gone position by position, breaking down some tough start-sit decisions that you'll need to make for Week 6 in the NFL. Make sure to click the link in the video description below to take advantage of that awesome offer by Underdog Fantasy, and like and subscribe this video. You guys know what to do. We got you covered with all the coverage you need to win your championship at the Stochastic Fantasy Football channel. Until next time, I'm Matt Savoca. We'll see you guys later.